Current Newton City Councilor Bill Humphrey is running for the 12th Middlesex District Representative seat. After 25 years, Representative Ruth Balser is not seeking re-election. Other candidates seeking the seat are Newton City Councilor Rick Lipof and former City Councilor Greg Schwartz. Newton News' Brian Dota spoke with Humphrey about why he's running.
We here at Newton News had the opportunity to bring in District 12 State Rep candidate Bill Humphrey and ask him for his goals during his time in office should he win the seat. As a lifetime Newton resident, he feels both qualified and obligated to improve his home.
Well, I'm a third-term city councilor now in Newton, but as you said, I grew up here. I'm a fifth-generation resident. I know these neighborhoods very well. I'm getting to know the Brookline neighborhoods of this district as we go in this campaign also. But I think that one of the things that I know from having grown up here and from all of the door knocking that I've done over the years to run for city council and for other things is just that it's not a monolithic place. There's a lot of different people, there's a lot of different perspectives. The issues that people are facing, the challenges that they're worried about varies greatly. There's a lot of commonalities, of course, but it's always helpful to get that face-to-face interaction, just like I did when I was growing up here and going through the Newton Public Schools, to find out what people really need help with from the government. And I view that as fundamentally the role of government. This should be a commonwealth for everyone, and the state should do something to help everybody, especially the people who need the help the most.
Among his main priorities, affordability, education, and proper elder care were high on the list.
Yeah, it's absolutely a top-of-mind issue, this lack of affordability of housing. And we saw an article in the Boston Globe about how a lot of young people are starting to think about maybe moving away from Boston, maybe even out of state, just to deal with the cost of housing. I'm someone who's dealt with this myself. I live at the family house, you know, like I said, fifth generation in Newton. It's a multi-generational house, so that works for us, but that's not an option that a lot of people have. But even so, I notice how many of the folks that I went to school with who are coming back to Newton, sometimes with their kids now and they're married, they're coming back to Newton or they're coming back to Brookline, they're moving in with their parents, moving in sometimes with grandparents. So we have to be addressing this. And I think the state absolutely plays a role in this. There's obviously a lot of questions around zoning policy. That's something that's come up a lot in Newton and Brookline over the past year or even the past 10 years, but it goes a lot farther than that. That's really just one element. We need deeply affordable housing. That often means help from the government in putting the financing together for that. We need to make it more available to just get some starter homes going, some triple deckers in some places, things like that, right? There's a lot of basic things that could be done. What the educators were asking for is the same thing that a lot of parents have been asking for. It's more resources to the district. Just better funding in general is always sort of the prerequisite to doing anything successfully. And some of that means local funding allocations being made available. Some of it means more assistance from the state. I'm certainly going to advocate at the state level for continuing to improve our education funding formulas. I think it's a mistake to assume that on average it's a wealthier community or that Brookline's a wealthier community and therefore everyone is wealthy. That's simply not the case, and we're under municipal finance constraints. So we do need to help out a lot of these folks, and especially because of the pandemic, although it was beginning beforehand, we've seen a lot of behavioral and emotional challenges. That was something that came up a lot during the strike as well. The costs for providing care, whether it's in the home, which is often the easiest and most natural way to do it, or if you have to send someone to a facility, whether it's nursing home or assisted living or memory care, those costs can add up tremendously quickly. I know someone in Newton who is having to sell her home to pay for her partner's care. And this is something that is going to be putting a tremendous pressure on a lot of families. It's critically important that we take care of our elders. They've contributed so much to our families and our society, but those costs are enormous. It's a poorly regulated area, And in many cases, there are programs that help the absolute poorest folks with the least resources, and there are plenty of things to help the folks who have all the resources in the world to pay for things privately. There's not a lot of good middle ground options for folks that are just ordinary middle income folks. That's where we really need help.
He also wants to help Massachusetts better prepare for the climate crisis and bolster unions and workers' rights across the Commonwealth.
Climate change is the type of problem that's not going to be solved by the markets on their own, or at least not on the time scale that is necessary based on the scientific community's recommendations and assessments of the crisis. So we need to provide those nudges to the private sector to get things moving faster. We need to provide individuals, whether they're homeowners or businesses, the ability to make that decarbonization transition. We need a just, fair transition. That kind of thing is often referred to as the Green New Deal. But we also need to be looking at resilience. So in particular, I know that in Newton and Brookline, there's increasingly a lot of issues around flooding. People's homes are getting flooded, and sometimes it's near a waterway, sometimes it's not. We had a lot of post-war construction that happened in wetlands areas where we would never build something today. That was a mistake. Can't undo it now, but we can put in a lot of resilience measures and mitigation measures, and I think that has to be a priority, especially in a district like ours. Well, I've always been a friend to organized labor, and I will continue to be. I think there's also a huge component of the economy now that are these sort of gig workers, conditional workers, contractors, things that are a lot more tentative. There's a lot less job security there. You can really lose everything pretty quickly, and you have to pay for a lot of the things yourself. That model is not really working. Those folks need additional protections, but we also need our labor unions to be stronger, to have more rights. We need collective bargaining to be easier. We need to be promoting it more. One thing I've discovered is that a lot of folks that don't have connections to unions and don't have family in unions don't really know a lot about it. They don't understand some of the protections that they could get, some of the benefits they could get. I think some of that's an educational component as well. I am someone that used to do a radio show and a podcast for many years about American labor history and industrial history, and the labor movement is integral to that. And I think that we need to empower folks so that it's not just an individual trying to bargain with a big corporation or something like that, or with the government for their benefits, for their compensation. We need to make that easier. We need to make those unions stronger and have more members, and a lot of that is about encouraging folks to get involved and understand that this is part of the democratic process and part of your self-advocacy process. And the economy that we have and the society that we have set up now puts a lot of pressure on individuals and individual families to say that if things aren't going very well for you, that must be your fault in some way. It's really not. It's about bigger societal forces that are affecting everyone. But one of the best ways to break out of that is to have that camaraderie, to have that shared experience with other folks that you work with, so that you can advocate together for the same things and the same protections. That's something that my mother is very active with the Mass Nurses Association union that she's a part of, and it's something that I see firsthand as very effective, and I'll continue to support that and urge other folks to get involved in unions as well. Well, I'm running for the Massachusetts State House in this open seat Democratic primary in September because I believe that Massachusetts should be and can be a Commonwealth for everyone. I also think we should be a beacon for the rest of the nation. We should be trying to set an example. We should be a leader on things and coming up with new solutions and ideas. I'm always going to bring that openness to new ideas with me. I'm also going to bring my responsive constituent services, just like I've done on the City Council for the past 4 or so years. So I'm really excited to be running in this race. I've been knocking hundreds of doors since I got in the race, and I'll continue knocking all the way until the primary.
This is Brian Dota for Newton News.